Good evening. Welcome all of you who are here in the County Commissioners Auditorium and those of you who are watching at home. I'll call our meeting to order and we'll do our roll call, if you will.
And that's one for present.
I'm not doing something right here.
One,
yeah.
Enter, and send.
It's not showing up on my screen.
Number one for present.
Number one, is that?
One and send.
We don't
It's
have
not
to
showing
hit
up on my
send.
screen.
Just one.
I am here.
We only have to do one.
It usually comes right up on the screen.
I'll color it in.
I can note that you are all present and
Thank
see
you.
if we can-
Okay.
I have a force field that does it.
Could be the batteries. That's what I always say.
It's Clark's third law. Technology.
I can't help with the electronics, that's for sure. Okay, we will have our invocation today by Commissioner McGlawhorn and our pledge by Commissioner Albright. If you'll please stand.
Shall we pray? Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. Thank you for our life, health, and strength. Especially God to come into this meeting. Help us to make the decision that will be pleasing to thee. These blessings we ask in thy holy name. Amen.
Please place the flag. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
And if you will vote by hand.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay. Thank you. And we have a few public hearings tonight, and Mr. Rhodes, you're our public hearing man. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. We're going to take you through Zoning 101 tonight. We've got 2 rezoning requests for public hearings and 2 conditional use permits. So we'll try to spend a little bit more time going through some procedural things, but at the same time, try not to belabor it. Please let me know if you have any questions. The first one is your straightforward rezoning. So with this is for Glandon Forest Equity. It is right at the main intersection in Stokes, the intersection of 903 and NC 30. And the request is to rezone a small portion of a piece of property from rural residential to general commercial. Just to orient you a bit, here is the main intersection. Fire department's right across the road at the intersection of 903 and Highway 30. There's an abandoned structure here at the corner. This is just adjacent to that abandoned structure. This will give you a little bit better feel for the types of land uses in that vicinity. Again, that was an old commercial store there at the corner. It's now abandoned. This is an additional area to be added to the general commercial zoning for that particular lot. It's currently part of a residential lot and is being requested to be rezoned to general commercial. You can also see some institutional uses in close proximity, as well as some utility and governmental uses, especially one to the north there is where the fire department, volunteer fire department is located. Several general commercial uses, also the school site, Stokes Elementary School, is just off to the corner, off the side of the map. And with any of these rezonings, we'll always want to compare it back to our land use plan. Your general statutes require that. So and we'll talk about the consistency statement in a while. So here's our comprehensive land use plan designations. The bulk of this area you can see is a crossroad community. And this is not unlike what we have in Belvoir or Blackjack. We know that we're going to have a mix of uses at these major crossroads. relatively major crossroads for a rural environment. Keep that in mind. And again, what does that mean in our land use plan? A commercial crossroads community designation is intended to have a mix of residential, public institutional, and commercial uses, basically to provide services to that surrounding area. And here's our zoning map, current zoning map. Some of those commercial uses we showed earlier show also up on these areas. There are some non-conforming situations in areas like this where there have been older commercial uses that may not actually be designated that way on the zoning map. Here, this store has been abandoned for a while, and again, there appears to be some plans for reuse of that particular commercial area. So the designation that they're moving towards is general commercial, and again, for that type of designation is to accommodate a range of retail service, limited wholesale and moderate density, could be multifamily residential uses, and it needs to have access to major thoroughfares. We have reviewed this, the planning staff has, and we agree that it is in compliance with the land use plan, especially since it's within the crossroad community designation. And there are also other commercial type uses in close proximity. We find that it's also reasonable and in the public interest. Those are statements that also need to be part of your action tonight if you move forward. And in this case, because the subject property is located in a major or right close to a major intersection, and it's also several existing general commercial uses in that area. The planning board also has reviewed these plans for rezonings go through the planning board they're your advisory board. They look at the staff report as well. They've offered their recommendation for approval of this particular request as well. So with that, Madam Chair, we're ready for our public hearing tonight.
Okay. Do we have?
Madam Chairman, nobody has signed up to speak unless you're somebody in the audience who'd like to come forward.
Did anyone come in late that didn't get a chance to sign up to speak from this issue that would like to come forward? Okay, I'll open the public hearing and close it. Okay, anyone on the board have any questions or comments? Okay, entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Seconded.
And your voting system is now working.
Yeah, oh, okay.
It's working?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Clerk is alive and well.
that passes. Thank you.
Okay, your second rezoning request is for a conditional rezoning. And this is a zoning process by which, if you move forward in approval, the conditional district rezoning is typically for one use and one use only, and tonight that is for a sand mine. So the actual request is from Ms. Carol Peaden Brown to rezone 67 acres located on the southern side of NC 33 West. I'll show you a map in just a minute. It's a couple of larger parcels, and we're going from rural residential to rural agricultural conditional district, your CD, RACD, to operate a sand mine. So with this, you've probably seen there are two different items in your public hearing section tonight. This first one is a public hearing for the conditional district rezoning. There is also a conditional use permit required for sand mines. So two separate processes, two different styles of processes that you'll need to go through for these two activities. The second of which, with your conditional use permit, will be a quasi-judicial procedure, and we'll go through those details later. So, the site is located, this is Martin Luther King Boulevard. This is your interchange with NC 33 heading westward toward Belvoir and also Tarboro. These are two large parcels right here, and you can also see the Belvoir Elementary School right in this area as well.
There we go.
There's some other...
Can you back up? We were slow on getting that screen.
It just came up right then.
which screen was that?
We just now saw the map.
Okay, map. Here's your major interchange of Martin Luther King Boulevard with NC 33. This is NC 33 going back in toward the city of Greenville. The extraterritorial jurisdiction is shaded in light blue. Heading westward, you'd go past Belvoir Elementary School, is located right here where the cursor is. And heading on further out, you go into the crossroad community of Belvoir. The area bounded in the yellow hash line are the two parcels, or is the two parcels that would be included in your rezoning tonight. Those include about 67 acres. Also worth noting on this, you can see some other either active sand mines right here on this area that was permitted by the commissioners earlier, and also an abandoned sand mine here, another abandoned one here, one that's been reactivated right here, and some other ones that are also abandoned have gone through the process there. A brand new one has opened just off the corner of this map on NC 33 next to Seville Lane.
So when you say abandoned, I don't want the citizens to think that that's just the big holes just left there and that sort of thing, so.
Thank you, Madam Chair. They have been reclaimed. They have been through a reclamation process by which they are no longer actively being mined.
Right, and they usually have vegetation on them, and thank you.
Yes. Again, back to our existing land use map, and this will just give you an idea of the other types of land uses in the area. I've already highlighted Belvoir Elementary School, that's shown in blue here. That's an institutional use. There are, coming off of Old River Road, which is to the south, several linear style subdivisions and manufactured home parks that run up to the creek on the southern boundary of the rezoned or area to be rezoned tonight. Everything in gold are residentially used lots or parcels. There are some large manufactured home parks in this area, as well as some subdivisions as well, and some scattered residential uses. Back to our land use plan. Here at the intersection or interchange, that's been recommended for commercial use at the appropriate time in the future. So you can see a bubble of red there. The vast majority of the area here is in suburban residential, and along the creek, primarily associated with the 100-year floodplain, those areas are ag and open natural spaces. So the current suburban residential designation in the land use plan gives a large range of uses that would be allowed, primarily residential, but allowing for heavier density type uses there. It also, as far as some of the locational criteria, requires it to be on major streets or roads. The agricultural open space natural resource area, again, basically the 100-year floodplain, needs to be very low density and also needs to be protected in certain ways. So here's the current zoning map. Just to highlight a couple of uses that have gotten or received commissioner approval in the past. This is an area that's actively being mined. It has been downzoned. This is a downzoning of sorts. We're going from a more intensive zoning district down to a lower intensive, from rural residential to rural agricultural. So the same has been done on this particular parcel here, expressly for a sand mine operation. Right off the corner up here, exact same thing. There was a rezoning to downzone that to RA, expressly for a sand mine. That's the same request that's before you tonight. So the rural agricultural district is intended to accommodate very low residential uses and agriculturally related industries, and those can be industrial sites such as a sand mine or other things that are somewhat agriculturally or resource oriented. In this case, conditional district is being requested, and it is solely for the operation of a sand mine. So this rezoning, if it moves forward, that would be the only allowable use in that RA district. So a little bit about this particular parcel. and you'll see a lot more detail, and I'll spend more time with the site plan at the next, when we move forward to the conditional use permit. Here's your mining permit boundaries currently. That's the excavation area, so a lot of times there are separation requirements. You're coming within that 67 acres, and the excavation area is going to be set back within that. You're going to have a reduced area for excavation. It won't be the complete 67 acres. Also, screening is required, and we'll talk about that later, and some existing vegetation will also be retained along the flood boundary at the southern side. So, as before, planning staff has reviewed this. This was considered also at the planning board level. Both groups have agreed that it's given certain characteristics of the site, its proximity to Martin Luther King Boulevard, Major Road, NC 33, and the mix of uses in that area. We believe that it is consistent with the land use plan. It is reasonable and in the public interest. And there are also sites that have been treated similarly in the general vicinity as well. The planning board reviewed this and likewise agreed that it was consistent with the land use plan and recommended approval. So with that, Madam Chair, staff recommends approval as well as the planning board, and we are ready for the public hearing tonight.
Okay. I declare the public hearing open. Do we have anyone signed up for this particular one?
Yes, Brian Pagundis with Art
Brian
Consulting.
Pagundis. Okay.
Madam Chair, I'll keep your time at 5 minutes per speaker.
Okay. And if you'll identify yourself and who you
Certainly.
are.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I'm Brian Fagundis. I'm with Art Consulting Group with a civil engineering firm that's helping Ms. Brown with this request. As Mr. Rhodes explained to you guys, this is a conditional use request going to RA, conditionally specific to the sand mine land use. With that, the property and its proximity to the bypass, we felt like this was a right location for this request. Felt like it's in conformity with the land use plan and with the surrounding uses. And with that, I think he did such a good job explaining it. I don't have a whole lot else to explain other than I do want you guys to be aware that as part of the process going through staff review and through the planning board process prior to tonight, we have had a lot of conversation with Pitt County Schools and in particular with Mr. Aaron Erickson, who is the Director of Facility Services with the school system, to ensure that the way this proposed mine would be operated meets some of the things that they as school operators wanted to see met. So there's been a lot of back and forth. We've had a lot of conversation, had a sit-down meeting after the planning board meeting to make sure that we were doing some things and had some checks and balances in place to accommodate that. So with that, if y'all have any questions, glad to answer them.
Okay.
So what
Yeah.
kind of oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. That's all right. And then you, Alex. Go ahead.
Thanks for coming, Brian. It appears that the rezoning request does overlay a creek in the floodplain. I wondered a little bit more elaboration about what will be done to preserve that waterway in an effort to reduce sediment flow into the tar in the event of floods, but also just in regular rainfall.
Sure. So one is we're providing a separation between the mine itself and the creek, this, I guess, our southern and western border. So whatever vegetated buffer is there now, plus an additional 50 feet, plus an additional county required zoning setback is being maintained to separate the excavation area from that natural feature. As part of our, we'll call it air quotes, site plan process with the county, we'll also go through their floodplain development process to ensure that we're compliant with that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I
Mr.
didn't,
Albright.
had not, I was looking for Mr. Erickson's note, and I've seen it. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Is that it? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And there's no one else signed up to speak on here?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Is there anyone who would like to speak that came in late maybe? Okay, if there's not, I'll declare the public hearing closed. And again, James, you said this will come back to us?
It is the next item, yes.
Right. Oh, okay. Not at another meeting. That was what I thought I had understood when we reviewed it. Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, let's vote. Or not in favor? Okay. Passes. Thank you very much.
Okay, your rezoning public hearings are passed. We're moving into the conditional use permit phase, and specifically for the same property that we have just handled the rezoning for. So with that, we'll give you a little overview of the requirements that have to be met as far as considering a conditional use permit. I mentioned a little bit earlier, everything was contingent upon that rezoning going through. It has now been approved, so we'll move forward to the conditional use permit. And this is handled through quasi-judicial procedures. It is very similar. Most of you are familiar with boards of adjustment, similar to the procedures that board handles when they're dealing with cases. For conditional use permits, it is the only item through the zoning ordinance that this board has to use these types of procedures for. So what does it mean? We'll hold a public hearing after the staff report, and it's here to establish facts about the case. Quasi-judicial meaning semi-judiciary, so we're handling it more like in a court of law. People will also be sworn in. They'll have to provide their testimony under oath. And we're not here for hearsay necessarily. Typically, folks that will be coming up to provide information about cases like this have to give expert testimony about whether it's an engineering situation, transportation-related situation, someone that has studied and reviewed the case. We maintain detailed records of this. No ex parte communication unless if you do we go out and have been to the site and maybe spoken with someone, it's good to have that disclosed before the full group tonight. And we will have written findings of fact after this procedure tonight. Reasons for disapproval will be written or provided in writing. And again, these details, just like with the Board of Adjustment, their actions don't come back to you for any appeal. They go straight to the Superior Court. Similar actions would happen here if this is appealed. So with that, Madam Chair, anyone that's signed up to speak tonight should come up to be sworn in by the clerk at this point.
Thank you,
Brian Fagundes, as well as anybody else who's here to speak.
Okay.
Place your left hand on the Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Okay, we've been through most of the details already as far as the site. Again, shown on the screen now is about 67 acres in total, 2 parcels included. Here again is our land use plan and the existing land uses that are in close proximity to the conditional use permit site. Back to the site plan. So anytime we get a conditional use permit, you will get a detailed site plan presented. There have been, and Mr. Fagundes has already mentioned it, some minor revisions that he's going to speak to and have some additional information to add to the record tonight. So the one that's in your package, this is the mining permit. This is what is expected to be included in the state mining permit when it's applied for and received. So it's a little bit less than 67 acres in total because you can see a little notch that's been taken out right here where the proposed driveway would go out to NC 33. This is the excavation area, which is a subset of the mining permit boundary. We mentioned that it is necessary to have screening surrounding the entire site. Areas that currently do not have any vegetative borders, an earthen berm would be established there, so you can see along this side, also along NC 33 and along this western boundary. The existing vegetation, primarily along the creek and the flood-prone areas, will be retained along the southern boundary here. And Commissioner Nunley, here's exactly where the non-encroachment area is, or the 100-year floodplain, actually the floodway in this case. And you can see that purposely the mining area has been removed from any of those areas. That mining activity is not allowed within the floodway. Here's the Hall Road, and again, Mr. Fagundes will talk further about some comments through NCDOT and the driveway permit that's being requested for that. So with our, in our zoning ordinance, we do have specifically prescribed conditions that are already there. And with a conditional use permit, these will always apply. You can also apply additional conditions if you feel those are necessary. So in any case with a sand mine, there needs to be 100-foot separation. Those were shown on the site plan that we just reviewed from the edge of the pit to any of the property boundaries or permit boundaries. Hours of operation only come into play in mining situations. However, we have had some situations where the board has put additional conditions on a mine. Screening, we've talked about that, how there's either have to be berms or vegetation around the perimeter, and we also must have a state issued permit for the sand mining operation. Okay, then we have several criteria. These are prescribed in state statute as well, and also reiterated in our zoning ordinance. So the board must deny the permit if it concludes that the development as proposed at the hearing tonight in its proposed location more probably than not, and there are 4 criteria, if it will materially endanger the public health and safety. And with each one of these criterion, planning staff has attempted to give you what we believe is the situation. It is up for interpretation. This is our best interpretation here. As far as endangering public health or safety, you can see at the very end, we do not believe people or properties will be adversely impacted. There are other sand mines in the general vicinity, and we don't feel like the motorist or the air quality will be endangered. Will it substantially injure the value of adjoining properties or abutting properties? We believe that it will not. There's separation requirements. There's also screening that's required there as well. And within this general vicinity, there are light uses, that being a sand mine. Will it not be in harmony with the area in which it is to be located? We feel like it is. As I've mentioned, there's several other uses comparable to this in the general vicinity. And will it not be in conformity with existing plans that have been adopted by the board? We believe that it does conform with the land use plan, and it does not impede the thoroughfare plan. So with that, Madam Chair, our recommendation for tonight, a couple of things. Motion number 1 is to acknowledge that the application is complete and complies with the zoning ordinance. Number 2, approve the conditional use permits subject to those prescribed conditions in the zoning ordinance with a few additional ones. Obtain a floodplain development permit, which Mr. Fagundes mentioned earlier, and also obtain the NCDOT driveway permit. Additional conditions that he's alluded to as well was to provide documentation to Pitt County Schools concerning air quality concerns that they had, and you've got a letter to that effect, and that will be entered into record tonight as well. So with that, Madam Chair, we're ready for the public hearing.
Okay. I'll declare the public hearing open, and we have one person.
Again, Brian Fagundes.
Okay, Brian, if you'll come forward, please.
And I'll keep your time at 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. Again, I'm Brian Fagundes, licensed professional engineer in the state of North Carolina, and as such, with private practice experience in permitting several sand pits, have the background to serve as a witness and enter testimony tonight for this request. First off, I would like to go ahead and enter a couple of items as evidence, if I may. And I think these are consistent with what I understand you guys were provided in your agenda packet. One is correspondence to Dr. Linker, Pitt County Schools Superintendent. This is a letter from Mrs. Brown, essentially outlining some of the things that they are committing to do as the permittee for this to help satisfy some of the potential things that could arise and what the remedy for those could be. And this is the result of the meeting I alluded to in the previous public hearing that we had with Planning Department staff and with Facility Services staff. And with that, I would like to also enter into evidence email correspondence between myself and Mr. Aaron Erickson with Pitt County Schools, along with some documentation of current existing conditions at Belleville Elementary School relative to air quality and some of the maintenance activities that they perform on their HVAC systems, and also relative to medical events that they document as part of their ongoing documentation process. So with that, and unless we have specific questions you guys would like to address on the findings of fact that Mr. Rhodes presented, I'd like to continue down the path of some of the plan modifications that we made in concert with the schools and the planning department staff. I have in my hands, and I don't know that there's an easy way for me to illustrate this to you guys, but I have in my hands a revised plan, essentially the exact same plan that you guys have, with the exception of this revises the mining limits based on meetings with the school system to essentially prevent the mining at the far western end of the property closest to the elementary school, and to shift the driveway to the west in an effort to help satisfy the school's concerns and also to help mitigate one of the DOT comments we received, which was they wanted to push the site driveway for this proposed mine away from the interchange at the bypass because they don't like driveways any closer than they have to be to a major interchange like that. I'd love to be able to walk you guys through it. I don't think we have the capability to put it on an overhead and show it to you, but I will enter this into evidence, and this will be the plan that county staff uses and the DOT uses to issue these final permits associated with this, and this will be the same plan submitted to the state as part of the mining permit application process.
Okay, so the change in the entrance and exit has been moved and...
Correct,
right,
correct.
okay.
Essentially, the correspondence between Mr. Erickson and myself, and I believe Mr. Eric Gooby was copied on that email. This plan is the representation of that correspondence.
Is it possible that using the map that we had shown before, we could just indicate those
absolutely.
changes? Yeah,
absolutely. So with that, I'll enter this into evidence, and then I'll try to walk you guys through that map.
Thank you.
Has our planning director, James Rhodes, seen the revised map and approved it per se, or?
No, because as part of this process, this has been an evolution to get to this point. So they've seen it in the sense that the planning department and the school system saw it in a meeting between all of us. Has it gone through the formal TRC process? No, but that's where it's headed as part. Essentially, the only thing left to permit is the driveway location, which we knew had to change anyway. As part of shifting this driveway, that's where the mine permit limits were shifted as well to comply with what the school system was asking for. So the driveway on the map that you guys were provided, if you can see my cursor moving on your screen, this driveway location is here. The limits for the permit run along and parallel with Highway 33. If you notice this bump out around the grove of trees on this end, now there's a corresponding bump out on the western end, much the same way, and that driveway has been shifted to this western end of the site per DOT's request.
And can you point out on this map where the school is? Give me a general idea.
It's off the page. Belleville School Road is right about in here where my cursor shows.
Thank you.
the separation between the proposed driveways is somewhere order of magnitude 375 to 400 feet apart.
Okay, the two things, under additional conditions that were on here, these things that you're talking about have not, I mean, do we need to change the wording of that, James, before we vote on this?
Such as the TRC approval or?
So what I would suggest, if I may, and I don't know if I'm allowed to suggest that or not.
You're allowed to say it, and then I'll ask James if
What
that's
I would
okay.
suggest is that we subject the approval conditional to the conditional approval of this plan that I've entered into evidence, and then that supplements and goes along with the existing conditions that county staff has already placed. That way, this plan has adequate opportunity to go back through staff review and approval process.
Okay. Does that sound okay to you, James?
Just to be clear, you're going to give us authorization to review and approve this?
Yes. And if you don't, then it'll have to come back.
I approve that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else, Mary?
The land is just soaking with the new gold. But what I want to know is about the cemeteries that's on it, the two cemeteries. Are they, is there still being any new burial sites or whatever? Because one is a little distance from another, or is it going to fill in between? And if the trustee of the cemetery is aware of it.
So what I can tell you about the cemetery is our pit boundary.
They own one of these depicted.
Yeah, the pit boundary is a couple of 100 feet, and I don't have a scale to take an exact measurement, but it's a couple of 100 feet away from the cemetery, and then beyond that mining permit boundary, and then beyond that boundary, so in addition to that couple of 100 feet of separation there, you've got an additional 100-foot setback beyond that, so you've got probably no less than 300 feet of separation between where the cemetery sits in the northeast corner and the mine itself.
One concern about mining in the area is the dump trucks. The traffic along that area and the school, when they're closing and opening, I think it's 55.
I'm going to have to take your word for it, but I think you're right. I think it changes back to 45 on the east side of the bypass.
Further east,
right?
Yes.
I think that's correct.
That's the concern that I have. Other than that,
and we had the same.
Won't grow anything.
We had the same concern initially, which is why the driveway on the plan in your packet is shown at the far east side, was to try to provide as much separation from the school as we could, because of the exact concern that you're talking about. The Department of Transportation didn't have that same concern. Conversely, they wanted us to shift our driveway further down towards the school to get it away from the interchange, because they felt like the competition between the truck traffic for this operation and the limited school traffic coming in and out was less than the potential for having the driveway further down with conflicting traffic with the interchange. So, and we discussed all this with Mr. Erickson when we met, and all agreed that this driveway location was actually a better fit.
That's what my concern is, because further east of this site, the new site that we're looking at tonight, is another big sand pit, and I don't know whether they're still hauling out of that or not. So they come up to Martin Luther King Drive to go to the Aiden stuff, and the dump trucks, it's hard to stop when they're loaded.
Correct.
So that's my concern. for the public safety.
Yeah, and I
And if
understand that.
they'll
And
cut that a little bit in speed, it might help. But
and that was why the driveway shift, that was why DOT wanted it away from the interchange, was to give not necessarily dump trucks, but other motoring public adequate time to stop as they come off the interchange. It is our belief that the very vast majority of the traffic that comes out of this operation will go back to the bypass. So by virtue of our driveway being prior to the school's driveway, the interference between the two should be minimal.
should be.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
I had a couple. This might be for Mr. Rhodes. Do we have a history of air quality issues surrounding sand mines?
Not to my knowledge.
So when we say we're routinely checking air, is that a process different from checking the filter system, or is?
Well, that is Pitt County Schools, but also the state mining permit requires that the dust, a lot of times these haul roads can become quite dusty during the summer months when there's not as much precipitation. So there is a requirement that those be sprayed down. Typically, you'll see a water truck on site just to keep that any dust from flying up from the travel ways through there. So that's going to be your biggest issue, because most of the sand that's coming up from the pit is going to be coming out of water almost, and it's going to be not going to have that flying of dust and debris at that time.
My other is a wording comment. It's back for Mr. Fagundes. And I don't mean to be trouble with this, but when we're addressing the concerns or discussing a remedy, we're not really necessarily prescribing that they be remedied.
No.
And I wonder how that wording, if the applicants are comfortable with replacing addressed to resolved. I wonder about that. I don't anticipate problems, but neither do I want us to get into a situation where we're just going to talk about the problems and address them. And I'm talking about the schools right here. And we don't know what's going to come up, and we hope that there will be no problems. I'm looking at the report from the county and also the letter from Ms. Brown, I think, where she discusses a remedy to mitigate, and the county is recommending that we address concerns. But I don't see that either of those satisfy a need to resolve the issue, if there is an issue.
Yeah, so essentially this was written in the context of, we don't have a problem today. Here's how we monitor what we do, and here's the frequency that we're changing filtration systems. That's the best way that they have to quote, monitor what the air quality is.
I'm not really even talking about the air now. I'm just talking about this unknown commodity that's coming in next to the schools, and we hope there would be no problems. But if there were, the language at this point appears to me to say that we will discuss this, but it doesn't necessarily say that we will remedy this, is my concern. And that's all I'm suggesting here. That I think it's a language thing that could be resolved.
We've done that in the past in different things that have been brought back, right, James?
Yes, but I think in this case, with the evidence that's been presented by Mr. Fagundes, I would recommend removing that third bulleted comment or additional condition from your agenda package, because that has been discussed over the last couple of weeks since this agenda was put together. And we believe that with the response from Pitt County Schools, that has been addressed.
Is there another response besides the note from Mr. Erickson that says, at this time, we do not have any open issues?
That is what Mr. Erickson, yes, he has it in his email, but that he was speaking on behalf of Pitt County
That's
Schools.
at this time, and that's what I'm talking about, is the mine isn't open yet.
Right.
And we don't know at that time what we will be addressing. And so at this time, we have no issues, but my question again is, how do we resolve an issue in the future that we don't even know is going to be an issue? I accept that it seems unlikely that air would be one. I don't know that trucks or road use wouldn't be, or something else might come up.
Yeah, and I think, kind of to your point, I think that's why it was worded the way that it's worded, is we have the potential for issues. We don't know what those could be, but what you're getting is the applicant saying, should issues arise, we're more than glad to sit back down and let's try to figure it out together. And with that, that was what the school system had asked is, hey, we're not looking for an answer to a problem. We don't know what the problem is. We're looking for the opportunity to get back together and let's talk about it should something ever come up.
I did ask the question about if this was an active burial site for the two graves. I don't remember hearing, you know, are they still burying people or aren't they?
So I do not know the answer to that. What I do know is that cemetery is outside the limits of where this is.
I think in response to Commissioner Albright is that not a lot of times, but often, and James, you can step up and help me because I'm probably not going to say this exactly right, but we have had some issues and they have come before us and they have been discussed and they've been resolved. As some mines we haven't had any issues, and they're usually they want more of a buffer and the owners build more of a buffer, or they, like you switch the driveway, you know, based on what was better. So it's kind of a live thing that moves along as it goes along.
That is the benefit of a conditional use permit. If there are specific conditions that you might attach tonight that we believe are not being met, it will be brought back before the board. And we've had that before.
Yes.
I think that's a good reason for leaving that third sentence in.
So you
And in addition to that, at the county level, there will be state of North Carolina requirements associated with that mining permit that should think, and the same with the Department of Transportation's driveway permit. Should those things arise, you've got similar mechanisms at those levels as well.
Right.
So you don't know whether or not they're still burying people out there?
He doesn't know. He
I'm
said.
just asking.
I mean, he said he didn't know.
Yeah, I
Didn't
don't.
you?
I think he's saying it's outside the perimeter of this site, correct?
Yeah, the only thing that I can answer that with is I do not know whether anyone is being actively buried in that cemetery that sits there, but I do know that it's outside the area that's being requested to be permitted.
Okay, any other questions?
I don't have a question. I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay, do we need to close the public hearing? And now I'll entertain a motion.
Okay. I make a motion that we approve this.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. All in favor, please vote, or not in favor, vote. Okay, passes. Is that yours? It may be. Okay, you're welcome to have it. I'm not cool. Okay.
Okay.
One more?
One more. And this will be a familiar one to several of you because it has been before the board previously, but for the new members, we'll take it a little bit slower. Again, conditional use permit for a sand mine. This particular one has been before the board before, received a conditional use permit, and did not start work on the site within the required time period, so the permit lapsed, and therefore it's back before you tonight for consideration. Same process again, quasi-judicial procedures. And Madam Clerk, if you would swear in anyone wishing to speak tonight.
Do we have anybody?
Yes, we have two people, Frank Harvey and Billy Langley. You'll come forward to be sworn in, please. Anybody else who'd like to speak on this matter?
Pat covers.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you.
And the request for this conditional use permit to operate a sand mine is on a little bit over 160 acres located off Shepherd Mill Road near its intersection with Satterwhite Road. Conditional use permit, as I mentioned, was issued almost 2 years ago in June of 2017. Planning staff does conduct annual inspections of any of the conditional use and special use permits around the county, And this particular site had not begun operation within that 1 year period, and therefore it has expired and needs to be reconsidered. The total acreage of the mining permit has increased by about 22 acres, and that's because of our changes, some of our changes to our setbacks. The actual proposed excavation area has not changed. So a relatively large site. This is at the very eastern end of the county. This is Tranners Creek, which is the boundary between Pitt County and Beaufort County. Here's Shepherd Mill Road, and Satterwhite Road is just off the map here. You can see this site's going to have a relatively long haul road back to the bulk of the site. This is the cleared area. Also, you'll notice there's quite a lot of vegetation around the perimeter there. This is the zoning map. Not a lot to show in this particular case. All this area is already zoned rural agricultural. Unlike the previous site we dealt with that had to first be rezoned, this one currently allows sand mines through a conditional use permit process. Also, our land use plan, I mentioned Tranners Creek being off to the east. There's a sizable area that is within the 100-year floodplain. That boundary has shifted a bit since our land use plan was adopted. We've got new floodplain maps, and you'll see some of those changes on the site plan. As far as existing land uses, this is a very rural area, very sparsely populated. You can see only a few home sites and even a fair boundary around here. That's at least 300-400 feet away as far as the closest some of the residential properties are located. Other than that, it's undeveloped property. So the site plan. Here's the complete boundary. And here's the area that's to be covered in the mining permit, about 160 some acres. That's the excavation area, and again, that's a subset. It draws in from the permitting boundary at least 100 feet. And here's the existing vegetation. So in this case, there won't be any need for any earthen berms. The existing vegetation will be sufficient for screening. And again, same conditions that are in your zoning ordinance would apply to this case, the 100-foot separation, the screening, and also the requirement for a state mining permit. The 4 criteria, will it materially endanger the public health or safety? We believe it will not. With the sufficient buffers and screening, we believe that it will not endanger public health or safety. Will it injure adjacent properties? The value of those properties, we believe it will not. Again, separation requirements as well as the vegetation that's already in place. Will it be in harmony with the area? We believe that it is. You may recall we did have the Hatcher mine just north of here that was an existing, which has now been closed and was operating in that general vicinity. Is it in conformity with our plans for the county? We believe that it is. So, Madam Chair, we have 2 motions before you. Acknowledge that the conditional use permit is complete and complies with all the zoning requirements, and also is subject to the development standards that we've reviewed, along with a conditional, an additional condition of 50-foot riparian buffer on all streams, unless those are exempted through a particular process. A no-rise certificate on any non-encroachment areas, those are within the floodway, and an NCDOT driveway permit. So with those, we're open for a public hearing.
Okay, I'll declare the public hearing open, and we have 2 people that have signed up.
First, Frank Howie, if I'm saying that, Howie?
Yes.
I'm Frank Howie.
Okay. If you'll tell us who you are and who you represent. Or...
Frank Howie, I'm manager of Southern Lands and Timbers, LLC. And the reason we didn't start construction was we filed for a state permit, and we also own the Hatcher mine, and the guy that was leasing it got into the buffer, and he was supposed to fix it, and then he didn't pay his rent. We ended up having to evict him, and we got it fixed ourselves, but now that's all good, but in the meantime, while we were waiting on him to fix it, the permit, special use permit lapsed, and we're just asking for y'all to grant it back to us, and appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next, Billy Langley.
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members.
If you'll pull this down a little bit,
Okay,
thank you.
I got you. My name's Billy Langley. I live on Shepherd Mill Road. I may not be able to see the mine when it's in operation, but I can guarantee you that I will hear it. It's very close to me. And when you're talking 400 and 500 feet, it don't sound like much when you're in this room. But when you're standing outside, it's what, 6 mobile homes long, 7 mobile homes long, something like that. It's not long. So I'm close to it. So I'm concerned. My main concern, the reason I came tonight, was that in the original permit, there were conditions. Now we've got a new permit, and I don't hear those conditions being discussed. And one of the permits, and you may remember, some of you anyway, that the Hall Road and where it egresses to Shepherd Mill Road was supposed to be in the permit that it would not be moved for the lifetime of the mine. Do we remember that?
I don't remember that, but I remember discussing some things.
Mm-hmm.
So you do.
But, you know, I went with the landowner, Jerry Emmett, I'm sure you're familiar with. And Jerry and I spent a half a day of a whole day, most of a whole day, touring the mine site. And with the citizens that live in this area, even though we are widespread apart, we are a community. We don't have small yards, we have farms, but our property line is where we live. And sometimes when we're talking about it's scattered, it's not scattered at all. And when we use the term that it's, what's your term? That it looks good in the area? I forget what your term is. But a sand mine don't look good anywhere. You've all seen them and I've seen them. After they're done in landscape, yeah, they do look good. I agree with that. But we're concerned, okay? But we're in agreement with the mine. I'm not here to oppose the mine. I think the people that are going to operate it are trying to act in good faith. He came and spent a day and says, look, what can we do to make this work for you people? And we were satisfied with that. But I don't see it being discussed in this new permit. Now, one was the Hall Road would not change for the lifetime of the mine. It would exit the mine at the intersection of Satterthwaite Road. The other permit was that the vegetation would not be removed. And I don't know if that's been mentioned or not. Another concern I have is that in the letter that I received, well, I believe is in some of the discussion here with Mr. Rhodes, is that DOT will be involved in the actual connection of the Hall Road to the public road. Now, if we're promised that the Hall Road won't be moved, will the DOT come in and override that? Because there's a danger that a Hall Road could come out right in front of my driveway. And if it's going to come out in front of my driveway, I certainly wouldn't like that.
Is there anything else?
No.
Okay, well, we'll...
All I'm asking is that we include conditions on the permit.
Okay, well...
And Jerry Emmett and I have already talked about it, and he's in agreement with it, or was. It's just that I want to make sure that we're still talking about the same conditions.
Well, what I was going to ask James to do if you were finished is to, because my understanding is that what was there before is still there. We're just, it lapsed and all we're doing is getting it cranked back up again. Is that not correct?
I think two things that I'll go ahead and address real quickly. This is the site plan that's before you, so what's been shown to us, any of these buffers around the perimeter in the wooded areas are to remain, and the Hall Road is very prescriptive. This is the only location that it is being considered at this point. That is the same location it was on the previous permit.
All right.
So those two things.
So those two things are still the same as at the first permitting?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know of anything that has changed?
Just because of our measurements for the separation, there's additional area, about 22 acres, that's now included in the permit boundary that was not in there previously.
Okay.
But the excavation area is exactly the same.
Okay. Okay. Would you like to?
Madam Chairwoman, I just wanted to follow up after the neighbor spoke. The road hasn't changed, and we would never come out close to his driveway because that's a timber buffer that we voluntarily left that's bigger than the requirement, and it's old growth timber that's very tall and makes a good natural buffer.
So what was in the original remains the same,
Exactly.
and there has been some change, but it doesn't affect any of this as far as that's concerned. Okay.
All the conditions are the same,
Are the same.
as the previous request.
Okay. All right. Yes, sir?
Just one quick word. What I'm concerned about is we're getting a promise and not something that's going to be in the permit. This is going to be in the permit. It's going to be a condition of the permit. Am I reading that right?
Yes, sir.
It's still like it was written down. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you for coming.
Beth?
Oh, I'm sorry. You can
Thank
holler.
Madam Chair. James, just a quick question on just reading the map. The existing vegetation, I'm assuming, that's the shaded portion. That which is not shaded is land that has not been, that has already been altered, or there's no existing vegetation, is that correct?
That is correct.
So over the wetland area that's within the parcel that I guess abuts the boundary line there, that wetland area is, well, can you describe the state of that wetland? I mean, I guess the concern that I have is that when we're abutting major waterways, Trainer's Creek, and valuable natural resources in our county, that we are making sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure that these areas stay wild for sports people and for future generations, and just make sure that we're not cutting into that, and that we're not doing something that we can't put it back to where it was after we're finished.
Well, a couple of things. You can see most of that is not wooded because it's water standing back there. So those areas will be protected, certainly through an erosion and sedimentation control plan for this site, as well as, the setback of the mining operation itself, too. So we don't see that there will be any negative impacts there. The state mining permit is very specific about any discharge or not allowing any discharge into those areas.
Okay, anyone else have a question or a comment? Then I'll declare the public hearing closed. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve. Both.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve and a second. If we'll vote, please. Okay, it passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we're ready for the scouts. And I know it's not going to help you all tonight, but this will be the first thing on the agenda at our next event for this, because we look forward to this and we don't like for you all to have. But you did get to see county government in motion, right? Hope we didn't turn you against maybe running for public office one day.
Madam Chairman, if we can get a motion on the Eagle
yes.
Scout recognitions.
We need a motion to approve the recognitions.
So moved.
So moved.
It's been moving.
Second.
Okay, all
It's
in
been moved
favor,
second.
please vote. Okay, is this on? Okay.
All right, tonight we have 3 young men we're going to recognize as earning the rank of Eagle Scout in the Boy Scouts of America. As we like to note as we do these recognitions in Pitt County, those young men who earn this rank, probably statistically there's twice as many Eagle Scouts in Pitt County that earn this rank as probably in other areas or nationally. Also want to note that earning the rank of Eagle requires a lot of work on both the individual Eagle Scout as well as the other Boy Scouts who may help him earn this rank. In cases, hundreds of hours could be put into a project and much money could be raised to implement the projects that you'll hear described tonight. So we're going to call each one up individually. As we call you up, if you'll come up with any family, friends, Scoutmaster, anybody you have here to support you tonight. We welcome the other Boy Scouts you may have in your troop. So first one we'll call up is William Becker.
And anyone that would like to come with him. Just stand right over there.
Hey, good to see you. Hey, Brice.
Welcome. Thank you. Glad to have you. You'll just stand right there, and
Madam
he's going to
Chairman,
read
you'll turn this way and face the audience.
so that we can get a good picture.
So this is the certificate we are awarding, first of all, for the public. Entitled Certificate of Appreciation is awarded to William Becker for achieving the Eagle Scout Award. For his project, he made major upgrades and improvements to the Pitt County Humane Society. This is presented by the Pitt County Board of Commissioners on this 25th day of March 2019, signed by our chairman, Beth B. Ward. Ms. Ward.
Thank you, and we appreciate you doing a project with one of our county projects. Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Appreciate your help. Thank you. Would you like to say a few words? You don't have to, but if you don't.
I would just like to say thank you for giving me this opportunity to be recognized, and I very much appreciate it. And thank you for allowing us to come to this meeting and see the Board of Commissioners in action.
Oh, great. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay.
You want
to go?
a picture? Okay.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Okay. You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, next, Brice Bizzell. I'm saying that right name, last name correctly? Okay.
Hi, Brice. How are
Welcome.
you? Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Welcome. All
Come
right.
on, Mama.
Madam
I'm the
Chair,
mother of an Eagle Scout. So, Mama, get up here. I know where the work comes.
I'm the father of an Eagle Scout, too.
Pushing, and the father of an Eagle
Yeah.
Scout here also.
Let me proceed?
Yes.
Okay. Certificate of Appreciation is awarded to Brice Bizzell for achieving the Eagle Scout Award. For his project, he built new benches for the spectators at Rose High School tennis courts. Again, this is presented by the Pitt County Board of Commissioners today, this 25th day of March 2019. Again, signed by Beth B. Ward, Chairman of the Board of County Commissioners.
Congratulations, Brice. Proud of you. And know what a job it is. Congratulations. And hey, how are you? Thank you. Would you like to say something, Brice?
Like William said, thank you very much for this. Very important to my mom, my troop, my family. Just have a great time. It was good to see the meeting and see what you guys really do for our county. So
Good.
Thank you.
Thank
again.
you.
Thank you. Congratulations. All right, our third recognition is to Jamie Crass, if he'll come forward. Family, friends,
Anybody?
siblings. Hey. Just make a semi-circle here. Hey. Let's see. All right, Madam Chairman, I'll proceed.
Okay.
Certificate of Appreciation is awarded to Jamie Crass for achieving the Eagle Scout Award. For his project, he built a prayer walk complete with Stations of the Cross at his church in Winterville. Again, presented today, the 25th day of March, signed by our Chairman, Beth B. Ward.
Thank you. Congratulations. Proud of you. And you want to introduce yourself? Who are up here?
This is my mother, Susan Crass, my middle brother, Jordan Crass, and my grandmother, Martha Daughtry.
Hey, welcome.
And he is the third Eagle Scout in our family. Jordan
Yay.
is the middle one, and we have an older son, David.
Wow.
Wow, Mama.
They got to see us.
We'll give you a hand. Grandmama too. I know. It takes a village. Anything?
I just want to say thank you everyone else who's here and who helped with my project.
Thank you.
Can do a picture?
Thank you.
This one. Great.
Thank you all for being patient. Okay, next item is the public addresses to the board. Do we have anyone signed up?
Yes, Madam Chairman, one person, Robert O'Neill. If you'll come forward, give your name and address, please. The clerk will read our statement of public addresses. I'm the
yes.
clerk, the attorney, I'm sorry.
Yes, Pitt County welcomes comments on all matters of public concern. Please keep all comments respectful. Pitt County will not tolerate any personal attacks. Please state your name and address, and I'll keep your time at 3 minutes per speaker.
Robert O'Neill, 1900 Allen Road, Greenville. And of course, I'm up here about the landfill again. Mr. Albright, I'd like to say thank you for calling me and apologizing. And Ms. Perkins, I was watching the other day when y'all spoke about this. If I thought that I had an opportunity to speak then, I would have stayed. But I didn't think I would be able to, and I was not told that I could, so I did not stay, but I did go home and watch it. To talk about some of the things that y'all talk about that day, Mr. Elliott, February 14th, Valentine's Day. I left my house at 5:30. It was dark. They were running it. Went to the city council meeting, came back around 8 o'clock. It was dark. They were running it. Talked with NCDOT. They are not doing any hammering or any noises close to what they are doing. Everything that they are doing now, they are drilling to put the pylons down. And Ms. Ward, you spoke about, nobody's complained since August of 2014. I don't know if it was 14 or 15, but when I did first hear the noise, I did ride around and tried to look for what was going on. The only thing I saw was that they were cutting all the timbers down off of the Frog Level Road behind my house, and then they were cutting the woods down for the 4-lane. So I contributed the noise to that, and that the noise kept on going for the last 5 years, and I contributed, like everybody else has that is complaining now, to the road construction. I did not find out that it was not the road construction until this year. And when I told you about my son with special needs having a problem with the noise, that's when I came up here and spoke. I thought at the end of this year, the noise will be gone. According to Greenville, just because it is industrial and zone industrial and meets the 75 decibel meters or whatever, that does not overflow into the residential area that it is hitting over 60. So that is in violation. The backup alarms on the trucks, yes, they are aggravating, but they are set at decimals not to travel over a certain amount of time. A certain amount of area, so that people can, because the county attorney said that was the most annoying noise to her back there. And it's like I did the last time, and I played the video. If you do not cause that a noise ordinance violation, a nuisance, an aggravation to my livelihood and my property, I know that the county will lose a lot of money if transload leaves. That was one of the things in the meeting that I had with Mr. Elliott, how much that the county would have to pay if they were not back there anymore. To me, they're breaking their rules in number 12 of a nuisance. It does not say in the contract what a nuisance is, but it's like I said, I played the video. If that noise is not a nuisance to you, if you were living on my property, you'd be very mistaken and you wouldn't like it neither. please still do something. They make industrial vibrators. I rode back there yesterday to the gate and looked to see what kind of mechanism that vibrates the train cars. If it's the thing that's going over the train car, it looks like something from the Wild Wild West. I'm pretty sure there's something up to date that they can use to make it a little quieter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Madam Chairman, we have signed up unless there's anybody else in the audience.
Okay. Next, we have our items for report. Mr. Barnett, if you'll come forward.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Board of Commissioners. You have presented in front of you today the financial report for the month ending of February 28th. This is our 8th month of the year, so we are 2/3 of the way through. Our revenues are at 74% of our budget, and our expenses are at almost 65%. Both percentages are slightly lower than they were at this point last year, primarily due to two very large project transfers that we had into the general fund. With that being said, if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Any questions? A motion for approval?
Motion to approve, Madam Chair.
Second.
Okay, a motion's been made and seconded. Your vote, please. Okay. Next, Tim Corley, the Pitt County landfill closure update.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is going to be just an update. The state has, part of their regulations, have changed some of the compounds that they test for at our closed landfill facility on Allen Road. GMA, who is our consultant who does all our twice-a-year testing of the wells that are within the landfill, around the perimeter of the landfill, are here to give you kind of an update on where we are and where we're going. So I'll hand it over to Richard Sproul, who is in charge over there at GMA, and he's going to give you some background as well as some information on some recent testing that we've done.
Tim. Okay, so I got to learn how to do this electronics. Good evening, I'm Richard Sproul, and hello, Chairman Ward and the rest of the commissioners. Thank you so much for this opportunity to come and speak to you about the landfill. I'm a geologist and a hydrogeologist, so I will approach my discussion of how the landfill operates from the perspective of geology, not so much engineering. And Tim could address the engineering aspects of this update. And so this will be a pretty short PowerPoint presentation. I want to just start off by showing you the location of the landfill, and understand I can do this. Can you guys see that arrow without any problem? So you probably all know that the landfill is located west of Allen Road, and this is Allen Road south of Highway 264. And the main entrance to the landfill is up in this area. I really want to emphasize to you that there are two aspects of the Pitt County landfill. One of them is called the northern unit, and I'm just going to outline it here. And it's separated from the southern unit, which I'm outlining right here, by a couple of drainage ways and a railroad that's illustrated by this particular pattern. This is an area where there are lots of offices and production facilities of different types, storage facilities, so it's not a part of the active cell. So a southern unit right here and a northern unit located right here. These would be subdivisions up towards the north, and this thing is oriented properly so that north is this way. There's a north arrow. There are some drainages, ditches, surface water bodies shown on this map. One of them is located generally in this area and goes off in this direction. There's some drainages on opposite sides of the railroad track here, and this is a drainage over on the south side of the southern cell of the Pitt County landfill. So what I really wanted to get out of this is that there are two units. An older one, this is the older unit, and this is the northern unit, and there's a southern unit, which is the more recent unit, but both of these are closed. They're not receiving material at this time. I prepared this real simple illustration to try to get us thinking about how landfills operate. The Pitt County landfill, then, if you were to look from north to south, has two major areas where debris is stored, the northern one and the southern one. The railroad track that I mentioned would be located about right there, and these would be those two ditches that conveys some surface water seasonally in this area. And off to the south, I show another one. I illustrated intentionally that this one's a little bit deeper for reasons which I'll now explain. If you were to put some wells into the subsurface, either through the landfill material like this one or like this one, down into maybe 20, 30 feet below the land surface at most, then those wells, if you let water come in right in those areas illustrated with this little hasher, would fill up with water, and the water level would rise to this line that I've illustrated with arrows. And that line extends, actually connects with the ditch there and the ditch there, and will extend off in this direction. I intentionally sloped it upward towards the north and downward towards the south. That's the position of the water table. And the water table is the boundary between materials up here that are naturally occurring that don't have total water in the pore spaces. It's essentially unsaturated. And down here, every pore space is saturated with water. And the boundary between saturated down here and unsaturated here is the water table. If you go out in most areas of Pitt County and take a pair of post hole diggers and dig a hole 2 or 3 feet below the land surface, you'll see water in that hole. That's the position of the water table, and you can extend that outward away from that hole that you dig. In many places, the water table is in hydraulic connection. That is, it intersects a stream, as I've illustrated over here on this side. I'm going to show you in a couple of minutes that there are two types, essentially, of landfills that we have here in this country. One of them, illustrated by the Pitt County landfill, is a case in which the original land surface, which I'm showing by this dotted line, was loaded with debris from before the early 1990s and through the early 1990s. And when the landfill was closed, engineers designed what we call a cap. A cap is an engineering solution to cover the landfill with materials that don't transmit water downward very easily. We say they're low permeability materials, mostly clay. And many times you can find the clay right here in this area. There's a lot of clay in Pitt County, as you know. So this particular landfill, called the Pitt County landfill, has a capping clay on it, but it does not have a liner in it. So there's a very, very important date that I want to leave you with, and that's 1993. In 1993, regulations required that landfills be built with a lower confining material that would keep water and other materials from moving downward into the groundwater system. And that's simply called a liner. Those landfills that were developed after 1993 would typically have a liner down here that would be in connection with the cap. So what you're absolutely doing is isolating the debris from the environment. The Pitt County landfill doesn't have a lower liner. It's an older landfill. Both of these cells were built prior to 1993, as I'll show you here in a couple minutes. I want to just jump ahead and point out, I'm going to show this illustration a couple of times and point out to you how important this cap is. This cap is a man-made feature sitting on top of landfill debris that can subside, that can decay, and can move. And so the cap is a dynamic thing. It can move. It's subject to erosion and so forth. And so the purpose of this cap, if we can keep it in place, is to keep precipitation that falls on the landfill from moving through the landfill debris where it could pick up potential constituents that we might not want to have in our groundwater. So as long as the cap has integrity, the landfill is in really good shape. The whole purpose for the cap is to keep water out. And so there's all kinds of engineered structures up here designed to capture any rainfall that falls on the cap and remove it. So moving forward, just a timeline. It's really important that you keep in mind 1993, because in 1993, newly constructed landfills were required to have liners. That's that lower material that will allow you to capture any water that's in the landfill or enters the landfill and remove it, and that's called leachate. You've all heard about leachate. That's the liquid that you could capture in a landfill if it had a lower liner. I point out to you that the northern unit opened in 1974 and it was closed in 1990. So it's pre-1993, so it doesn't have a liner. In contrast, the southern unit opened in 1991 and it closed in 1995. So it spanned that 1993 important time frame when the state required liners. So neither of these landfills are characterized as having liners. Just a few words. I always hate words on illustrations, so I'll just kind of go through them slowly. The northern unit, 74 to 90. The southern unit, 1991 to 1995. These units have been closed. They're no longer receiving debris, as you know. They have a clay cap. There's a gas collection system operating by this company, and they are not lined. They have no lower liner. These two landfills collectively have over 3 million tons of waste in place of all different types. The groundwater monitoring varies based on the closure dates. And so the groundwater monitoring that we would have for up here in the northern unit, I'm going to tell you about that monitoring, is different from the groundwater monitoring in the southern unit. My company has been providing monitoring and consulting services to the county since 1994. So we were involved really early on in evaluating the conditions at the Pitt County landfill. When we talk about monitoring a landfill, my opinion is we're talking about two major things. We're talking about figuring out how the groundwater behaves beneath the landfill, which way is it flowing, how deep is there any indication that water's flowing through the landfill and getting into the groundwater? That's item number one. I'm going to talk about it first. Item number two, which I'll come back to, is what's the chemical composition of that water as influenced by things that may have entered the landfill originally or have entered the landfill by breaches in the cap and hence entered the groundwater system. So I just want to tell you a little bit about how groundwater behaves beneath the Pitt County landfill. We hydrogeologists put in a series of wells. The wells are illustrated as red dots, mostly a red pattern. That's a monitoring well, that's a monitoring well. They're usually around the periphery of the cells themselves. And so you'll notice a large number of monitoring wells. There are many monitoring wells all over the place, not just associated with the periphery of the landfill cells themselves. These monitoring wells allow us to go in and determine the elevation of the water in the well, and from those elevation data, how high is the water above sea level, allow us to determine which way groundwater is flowing. In addition to the monitoring that we do of the groundwater, we also collect some surface water samples. Remember, there's a surface water body there. We collect a surface water sample at this particular location. There's a sampling location for surface water at that particular location as well. So what do the data tell hydrogeologists about the groundwater at the site? Well, groundwater at the site is below the original land surface elevation, according to our calculations, and the debris then is well above the water table. Any contamination that we might find in the groundwater would have to move downward across the original land surface and down into the water table. So notice the slope from north to south of this line. It suggests to us that groundwater is flowing from north to south. So how do we prove that? We go in and we measure the water level in each one of these wells painstakingly by knowing the elevation of the well and how far below the land surface or below the top of that casing you find a water level, and then we contour it. And I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I just want to illustrate this. Right at this location, water would rise to 81 feet above sea level in this well. And at this location, water would be at 78 feet above sea level, and here it would be at 73 feet above sea level. Groundwater moves in the direction of decreasing elevation, so these arrows show us which way groundwater is flowing. So groundwater generally is flowing from north to south across the landfill area. These data were collected back in January of 2019. I want to point out that right up here, we hydrologists would say that this is up gradient, and this would be down gradient. In other words, groundwater is flowing away from this site towards the landfill, and groundwater is flowing away from the landfill towards the site that would be located here. So up gradient and down gradient. Okay? The groundwater patterns are different seasonally. In the wintertime, the water table is pretty high, and in the summertime, the water table generally falls. And so we evaluate consistently what we call the equipotential surface in the summer months as well. Here's July. And you'll notice the same general pattern. I don't want to work this too much, but the same general pattern exists in that groundwater is flowing from north to south. Up gradient is the source of the groundwater, down gradient is the direction in which groundwater is flowing. We'll have some data in a few minutes to show you that groundwater is probably discharging right here at this location along a southern boundary of the landfill in a ditch that was constructed as part of the landfill process. So we look at two things when we monitor a landfill. We look at which way is groundwater flowing and how deep is it. I don't see any evidence that there's a mound on the water table beneath the landfill, which would suggest that there's a whole lot of water entering the landfill from breaches in the cap. But I'll show you some chemical data now that might suggest that. So we monitor the groundwater, and then we monitor we monitor these same wells by collecting samples of water from the wells, submitting them to a commercial laboratory for essentially what I call everything in the chemical cookbook. The northern cell requires annual monitoring. The southern cell requires semi-annual monitoring, 2 times a year. Since the 1990s, we've monitored the water chemistry of wells in the northern cell annually, and in the southern cell, although some wells come and go, sometimes they're destroyed and we have to reconstruct them. These wells have been monitored annually since the 1990s. These wells have been monitored semi-annually as a general rule since that same time frame. We submit those samples to commercial laboratories, independent laboratories, and they send us the results back and we report those results to the state. We've been doing that since the 1990s with no significant problems discovered. Throughout that time frame, the state and the EPA will come up with new things that we should analyze for. You might remember recently hearing about Gen X, and you never heard about it before. That's a new thing that somebody thinks we should analyze for. So they're constantly saying to us, well, now analyze for this or that to see if any of that's associated with the landfill. So what I'm going to do in my last few minutes is give you an update on the most recent correspondence with the state in which they ask us to look at a new, what they call, emerging contaminant. In May of 2018, the solid waste section of DEQ, formerly DENR, required that all landfills begin to monitor for 1,4-dioxane. 1,4-dioxane is called by the state an emerging contaminant. They've discovered it. They think we ought to really evaluate it. Dioxane is a stabilizer in chlorinated solvents. It is found in consumer products like makeup, detergents, shampoos, paint strippers, greases, dyes, and according to Emma, who works with me, it occurs in just about anything that will make suds. If you mix it with water to make suds, it probably has dioxane in it. This constituent is highly soluble in water and not readily biodegradable, which means that if it gets into the groundwater system, it will sort of stay there and bacteria tend not to reduce it, etc. It's found at what we call the leading edge of the plume, which means it kind of moves along with the groundwater velocity and is not slowed by anything in the groundwater system. And I would just point out to you that the standard for this emerging contaminant is 3 micrograms per liter. And 3 micrograms per liter is the same as 3 parts per billion. So if the groundwater contains more than 3 parts per billion, 3 micrograms per liter, you would have exceeded the groundwater standard for that emerging constituent. To date, in July of 2018, we sampled for 1,4-dioxane, and it was detected only in wells in the southern cell. Only wells in this area outlined in green had detections for 1,4-dioxane. Specifically, the wells that Emma has outlined here in this green circular pattern are the wells that had exceedances for 1,4-dioxane. Remember that groundwater is flowing this way, so I think this is a pretty good sign that maybe contaminants are entering. This 1,4-dioxane is entering the groundwater system from the southernmost cell, but I want to point something else to you. These 2 sampling locations here called Pore 1 and Pore 2 are EPA-approved sampling. We use EPA-approved sampling procedures to grab samples just down in the sediment beneath the creek to see if they're contaminated. So we're concerned that if groundwater is moving to the south, what's happening to it, and is it discharging to the creek and hence could be moving off the site? And so we're happy to report that these 2 samples that are pore water from the pore spaces between grains of sand, silt, and clay do not contain 1,4-dioxane in excess of 3 micrograms per liter. And so the state said, okay, go back and do some more sampling, and I think they call it confirmatory sampling, and resample these wells and see if these contaminants still exist in these wells. And so we did that. In the meantime, the county, mainly through Tim Corley's group, decided that we needed to be really proactive and evaluate what we call potential receptors. Remember, groundwater is flowing to the south, from north to south across the landfill area. And if by chance groundwater is contaminated and leaving the property, then there would be potential for it to be for citizens to be exposed to it. So we call those potential receptors. The best potential receptors are obviously wells that tap the groundwater system. And so we decided to go out about 1,500 feet, and Tim said, no, go 2,000 to be more proactive. And so out 2,000 feet sort of from the edge of the landfill, there's a scale there. We looked at every place that we could that had a well. And so we found with these green patterns right here, inactive non-potable wells located at these locations. Inactive non-potable wells means nobody's using the water. And we found one, what we call active non-potable well up here, but it's up gradient and could not, in our opinion, be influenced by water chemistry associated with the landfill. So all homes and businesses within 2,000 feet of the waste boundary were found to have public water provided to the individual homes that are not using these wells. And there's only one active water supply well located up gradient. In addition, I'll tell you from all my years of experience in drilling wells for the county is that Bell Arthur Water Corporation, Eastern Pines Water Corporation use water from deep aquifers well below the shallow superficial aquifer. Most of the wells are 500 feet deep or greater. City of Greenville has 8 wells situated around Greenville, but today you consume in Greenville surface water from the Tar River, and our groundwater wells are used as emergency water supplies in the case of contamination or other issues associated with our surface water supply in our state-of-the-art plant operated by Greenville Utilities Commission. And so I don't have any real concern about these particular wells as potential receptors because water is supplied to those homes, and if there are wells there, they're much deeper than the shallow aquifer that would be potentially contaminated. So results, based on the results of this receptor survey, and after talking with the state, they asked us to go back and confirm that there indeed are some exceedances for 1,4-dioxane, and that was done in January of 2019. Those results are back, and to make a long story short here, all the exceedances are those that I showed in the circles a moment ago, and they're all in the southern unit monitoring wells. Whenever you have this kind of confirmed exceedance, the state requires that you notify them with a 14-day notice, and that notice was submitted to the state on February the 27th of 2019, standard procedure. I'm almost done. So what do you do next? These landfills are going to have to be monitored for a long period of time. When there's no liner at the bottom, the most important thing that you can do, in our opinion, is maintain the integrity of the cap to keep water out of it. So we've identified some issues with respect to sort of gaps in our data in terms of understanding how the groundwater system operates. So we want to install a couple of additional monitoring wells to establish where the contaminants beneath the landfill might be. And we also want to install what we call staff gauges. That would help us understand how water is flowing in these streams and which way it's flowing and how much is flowing. I find it really interesting that when you have an exceedance of a standard in the groundwater system, the state says you can do a couple of things. You can propose a corrective action plan. That might involve pumping the water out of the ground and treating it. It might be something like, I'll skip down to here, phytoremediation, that's a really cool word, which means you can use vegetation to suck contaminants out of the subsurface. You could actually plant trees in certain locations on the south side and have them extract the groundwater that might have low levels of these chemical constituents in it. But what we proposed is a little different, and the state, I think, likes the idea. We said instead of jumping to corrective action, let's make sure that we have a cap that is properly constructed. When we evaluated the Pitt County landfill, we saw places where settling may have occurred, where some erosion of the cap may have occurred, and we developed our concern that the cap maybe doesn't have the integrity that it deserves. So our plan that we call a pilot study approved by the state is to work with a structural engineering firm to evaluate and upgrade the landfill cap and the stormwater conveyances that get that water off the cap. And after that, we'll continue to monitor the landfill to answer the simple question, do most of these things that we're seeing in our groundwater that concern us come from water moving down through the landfill? And could it be prevented by upgrading the landfill cap? And so this pilot study is real simple. It says fix the cap and continue to evaluate the groundwater system to see if there is a positive impact associated with fixing the cap. We'll continue to evaluate this thing a year after the cap upgrades to see if there are changes in the chemistry of the water and flow patterns beneath the landfill. And after that pilot study, we'll evaluate whether additional corrective actions are needed, things like phytoremediation or pumping the water out of the ground and treating it, et cetera. And so I'm open to that. I've given you just kind of a general feel for conditions at the Pitt County landfill. If there are any questions, I'd be really happy to answer them, especially through the use of this map. Or I just want to point out that in all these projects, you have a project manager that knows more than the person who usually stands up and speaks about it. And that would be Emma Shipley and my company. And so if you have any questions I can't answer, Emma can.
Madam Chairman, can I add a comment? We're required by the state as part of post-disclosure requirements for the closed-out landfill sale to keep money set aside within the enterprise fund of the solid waste and recycling operation. And right now we have Brian's telling me, between $600,000 and $700,000 as set aside per formula based upon the Department of Environmental Quality for those post-closure requirements. So those monies would be for this purpose of addressing the cap issues and such.
And this was really kind of requested as a report because there had been a breach, or whatever you want to call it, just some minor on the top, and we wondered if maybe more was happening than we wanted to have happening. And we've learned that we're really kind of doing a pretty good job, and these wells that we're checking, and this has been going on forever, not forever, but for a very long time. Yeah. And we've been very successful at it, but I don't think the commissioners as a whole were really kind of aware of it. And that's kind of what the report was for. And I think unless you have a question or a comment, we appreciate the fact that you're moving forward with a plan to make it better and more efficient, and not to say that it hasn't been or that we're in trouble, because apparently from this report we're not. But that's because we have been proactive and have done a good job.
I would agree with that assessment. I'll just point out two things. All these caps are made of naturally occurring materials designed by human beings on top of material that we know is compacting and settling. And so when we did a walkover of the southern cell especially, we didn't see a large number of places that need repair. It's a reasonable number of places that need repair. And for a landfill of its age, I think it's in pretty good shape, and that's because the landfill personnel do a good job of grooming it, but sometimes grooming equipment, if you're up there on the wrong day, can create a place where water might enter the landfill. And I'll just point this out. We're really focused on these poor water samples down here. Maybe I didn't do a good job of saying, I think that the lack of 1,4-dioxane in these poor water samples tells us that nothing is escaping the landfill and moving down towards the south, which is a really good sign, in my opinion.
And I think that's kind of what we kind of needed to hear, that we've done a good job, we're doing a good job. And I think understanding that when we started, we didn't start when you had to have the underlying cover. And we've probably done a much better job than a lot of counties maybe have done, you know. So I think we've done a really good job. So just for information is what these people are here for.
Correct.
So,
no actions required.
Okay, we don't have any action required, and we thank you very much for your time.
Good to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Continue your good work. Okay. Mr. Croom, if you'll come forward. Hey, how are you?
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Good to be with y'all this evening. I'm bringing to you tonight the Pitt County February 2019 tax collection report. And this is year-to-date from July 1, 2018 through February 28, 2019. The combined collection rate for the real and personal property is 97.58%. The combined rate 1 year ago for real and personal property was 97.51%. We're up 0.07%. This is through the hard work of our collection staff. They've done an outstanding job to get us to this point. I also just want to let you know that Pitt County Tax Administration continues to use all resources that are available to us by North Carolina law.
Okay.
Make a
Thank you.
recommendation
Any
that you
questions?
accept.
Move approval.
Move for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, let's vote, please.
Thank you. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Manager?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I'll try to move quickly through my items. Manager's report, next meeting for the month of April, you have meeting dates on the 8th and the 22nd, 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. respectively. Item B is to remind you the Shepherd Memorial Library annual breakfast for elected officials will be April 29th at 8 o'clock. As we announced last meeting, that April will be National County Government Month, and we will be rolling out some initiatives with the theme of along the lines of keeping counties connected. If you'll put on your calendars for item D, the NCACC, North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, County Assembly Day is May the 1st. That is the day that all 100 counties go to Raleigh to lobby on behalf of the association's legislative goals, as well as we take the opportunity also to remind our own delegation of our own goals here in Pitt County once again. Item E on the list on the next page of the agenda, the Inter-Green Corporate Park Sewer Project is complete. That is the extension of public sewer into the back portions of Inter-Green Corporate Park. This was done through a combination of funding through the Mideast Commission, through the EDA, the Economic Development Administration, as well as GUC in a partnership with the county. There are other things to report that are not on there. One is the unfortunate announcement for the cancellation of the VEAC, which was an acronym for the Veterans Experience Action Center. We had that all 100% lined up for May 15th, 16th, and 17th here in Pitt County, but because of federal funding cuts, that has been canceled. According to Teresa Ball, our Veterans Administration Benefits Coordinator, they are looking at the possibility of having it rescheduled for 2020. Items G is just to make you aware, you may have seen through announcements of the Association of County Commissioners, there's going to be a Medicaid transformation convening in Durham on April the 10th. If you're interested in attending, let me know. I know our DSS Director, Jan Elliott, will be attending, and we'll probably have, obviously, other staff there. The last item along the lines of environmental reports tonight, at the request of Commissioner Ann Huggins, she had posed the question to me based upon a national report we just heard about the state of North Carolina receiving a failing grade for our drinking water in our public schools, asked me to see what I could find out from Pitt County Schools about our own school system and the water quality in the school system. So I put a request into Dr. Linker, our school superintendent, and received this report, which I'm passing out to you. And basically, this is a letter from Mineral Springs Environmental dated November 15th, 2018. It's just short. I'll just read it. I think this is good public information. It says, on behalf of Pitt County Schools, PCS, Mineral Springs Environmental collected on random drinking water samples from a total of 36 schools within the Pitt County school system. The random samples were collected for a location in the cafeteria/kitchen area and a water fountain located within each school. Prior to collecting samples, the water was allowed to run approximately 5 to 10 minutes. The water sample was then collected directly from the associated sample location faucet. Samples were transported under chain of custody protocol to Environmental Conservation Laboratories, otherwise known as ENCO, located in Cary, North Carolina, for analysis. Drinking water samples were analyzed for the presence of lead according to the EPA method 200.8. To summarize, none of the collected drinking water samples were detected at concentrations above the North Carolina Drinking Water Standard 15 UG/L. Again, this is signed by the PE professional engineer for Mineral Springs. So it's, hopefully that will put to ease any concerns, at least here within Pitt County and our public school system. And Madam Chairman, that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to accept the items for consent.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, let's vote, please. All right, and we have one item for discussion. Mr. Elliott?
Yes, Madam Chairman, we have the upcoming national conference for the National Association of Counties, otherwise known as NACo. following your travel policy, the travel and training policy for the county commissioners, which you adopted back in January 2017. We've followed the rotation schedule and in terms of basically the policy states that 3 commissioners per the policy normally travel. We offered that to the rotation of districts 3, 4, and 5 for Commissioners Nunley, Commissioner Albright, and Commissioner Fitzpatrick, who all declined attending. So then we moved on the rotation to the next 3 districts, District 6, and then A and B, which was Commissioner White, Commissioner McLaughlin, and Commissioner Colson, who all confirmed their interest in attending. Commissioner Mary Perkins Williams also desires to attend, and at her request, we brought this before the board for your consideration.
Madam Chair, if I may, a lot of work has gone into this travel policy, as you may notice in your packet, and it seems to be working very efficiently and effectively. So I'd like to make a motion that we continue our current travel policy as it is.
Okay.
Second that.
And there's a second. Okay, any discussion? All right, all in favor or opposition? Anyway, let's vote. I don't know how I always say all in favor. Okay, it passes. Thank you. All right, our items for decision. Ms. Whaley, will you come forward, please?
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to come before you tonight. I am here to ask permission to apply for a grant for a mobile adoption unit. It's a pretty lofty grant that I'm not real positive that I might get, but if I don't ask, I got to shoot high. It says non-competitive grant, but they've awarded it to places like Washington, D.C. and San Antonio, Texas, and Oklahoma City, but why not Greenville? Okay. It would allow us to reach people that don't have transportation that may not be able to come to us. It's up to $150,000 for an adoption van and associated custom cost. It's a pretty simple application process, and I just wanted to ask permission to go ahead and apply for it.
I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move. Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Let's vote. And while we're voting, Michelle, I just want to say how much I appreciate you and the fact there's never been a grant too big or too small for you to go after. And, you need to pull that together one day and let us see since you've been here.
Oh, when I retire, I'll try to get a nice
pull that
big
together
sum.
so we
But,
can.
I love opportunities.
Yeah, but that'll make us cry because you'll be retiring. But we really do appreciate what you do out there.
Thank you.
And I remember the day you came up here. It was very close to one of the first times I was serving as chair, and you were coming on, and I thought, I did, but I take it all back. Thank you for all you've done, is what I'm trying to say. I didn't say anything, but it was that look, because I felt the same way about myself. But
I'm short, but
no, look, I'm with you. That's why I was saying that. Okay, Tim.
Good evening again, Commissioners. This next item is an amendment to our radio and paging project consulting services. As you know, we have moved forward with, at your approval, we've moved forward with the 7th paging site, which came before you, I think last month, maybe a month prior. And we feel it's in our best interest to, this project's been so successful with L.R. Kimball as our guiding hand on the project that we feel it's in our best interest for them to see the project to final completion and to continue their consulting services with Pitt County and our partnership that we have with them. So this is a negotiated amount, and it is a not to exceed amount, so we're going to do our very best. This phase is a little less intensive as far as the work that will be required, but we wanted to make sure we had it all covered. So this is a not to exceed amount of $33,897. And we will try to keep that as low as we can and keep them as part of the project, but as little involvement as needed. So I'm asking this evening for authorization for the chairman to sign this change in the contract amendment number 2 with L.R. Kimball.
And this is money we already have.
Yes, this is included in the original contingency. That's correct.
Right. Okay. A motion?
So move.
Second. Second, okay. Let's vote. Okay, Randy, how are you?
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. On behalf of the Sheriff's Office, I come to ask about moving forward with an application grant for replacement generators at the detention center with the North Carolina Division of Public Safety and Division of Emergency Management. This is a 50% match grant, and if we're successful, it will help us tremendously. We have 4 300 kW generators at the detention center that have been in service for 25 years. We are at a point that we know that we will have to replace just simply because of maintenance and lack of parts for such old equipment. So with this opportunity, we would be able to save the county about $150,000 if we are successful in this grant.
Okay, any questions? Yes, sir.
Madam Chair, if I can just point out on this, we have not identified where the match, the $150,000 would come from. I have talked with, through the Sheriff's Office, through Chief Gentry, about the possibility of, well, right now it's not in your CIP. So right now, the possibility of A, or option 1, would be if we get additional Fed bed rate increase through the current negotiations with the federal government, to use those funds, or 2, if they are able to achieve more revenue than they budget for via the Fed bed contract. Right now it's 35 inmates per day, per month. If they have excess revenues, we could then take it out of there. But otherwise, we have not identified a funding source. But I do recommend you apply for it, and then we'll figure out.
Yes, sir. And should we not be successful, this will be moving forward in the 1920 budget cycle on the CIP.
Right. Okay, everybody understand?
Move.
Okay, motion?
Move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion, second?
Second.
Let's vote. Okay. And the Register of Deeds Preservation Project. And Brian, you're the designee.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon again. I'm representing our Register of Deeds, Lisa Nichols. She could not be here tonight. Ms. Nichols would like to complete a project that she has undertaken over the last few years, where she has preserved some of our historical documents here for Pitt County. She was approached by COFI to completely finish her project this fiscal year instead of waiting, I believe, probably 4 or 5 more fiscal years at the current rate to complete the project. Register of Deeds Office has a restricted pot of fund balance according to state statute that she would like to tap into. And right now, Financial Services, we do recommend, upon your approval, using that money to complete her project.
Okay, so we have to approve it for her to use it.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, any questions?
Move to approve.
Move to approve, second?
Second.
And there's a second, okay. Thank you, Brian. And Alice King, if you'll come forward, please.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. We're always happy to be here with our board, and tonight we have some hopefully good news. Our Pitt County District Park and partners in our county home complex will hopefully have an incredible new opportunity to enhance art and educational experiences within our complex. While they're setting up, our artist, Sally Jacobs, in collaboration with AMEXCAN, has been selected as a semifinalist in the Inclusive Public Art Project, which is an initiative of the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation. We're here to ask for your support in a home base for this project. But before we do that, I'd like to introduce you to Sally Jacobs, our artist, and let her share her vision for this great opportunity, hopefully, for Pitt County. Sally?
Thank you, Alice, and thank you, the members of the board, for hearing this project tonight. I am excited to present this. I'd like to first start with saying that we do have Juvencio Rocha Peralta with the Association of Mexicans from North Carolina, and we also have community partners, Scott Temple with Pitt Community College, whom are in support of the project. So, first, what I'd like to do is kind of read this so that I can give all the information accurately and be mindful of our time, and I'll go through the slides as well. And we do have the model here, so hopefully between the slides, the model, it'll be clear. So the proposed bus sculpture will tell the story of the East Coast migrant farm worker in the following ways. We will use a retired public school bus as the foundation for the sculpture. On the exterior, there will be large-scale fine art photographs of the workers. Some photographs will be portraits, and others will include work environment. In addition to the photographs, there will be a pattern which has been inspired by the Totonaca peoples, which is an indigenous community inspired in the state of Veracruz, Mexico. We can go to the next slide. You know, I was realizing. Here we go. And lastly, the exterior will feature a hand-painted image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, which will be on the front hood. We can go ahead to the next slide. Thank you, Alice, for doing that. And by the way, the photos that are here on the slide were taken from the Reflector, who came and attended the third community event for input from the community. So that's what you're seeing on there. Let me go ahead to the fifth slide. On the interior, I want to talk about the interior of the bus is going to be modified in 3 ways. An area for featuring time-based works of art, such as looping videos and other digital media. A second area for story maps, which will include the migration paths of those who travel to this area for work and information about their sending communities. The story is also revealed through audio narratives and environmental sounds that relate to the work performed. Go to the next slide. And a final area where community can add to the story by either sharing their story or by expressing empathy and gratitude through the creative arts by posting on a community board. All of these aesthetic decisions were part of 3 inclusive public art input events during the month of February. Additionally, out of these community events, the public indicated where they felt the work of art would best be served, and this was Alice F. Keene District Park. So we'll click to the next slide. Thank you. So here are the reasons why this site was chosen. Connection to a wide and diverse community partnerships, such as the Leroy James Farmers Market, Making Pitt Fit Community Garden, Eastern Carolina Village and Farm Museum, Wintergreen Schools, in addition to all the other communities that are part of this complex. And lastly, I'd just like to point out the value of this work of art, this sculpture, to gain a cultural and social appreciation through reflecting and revealing the diversity of Pitt County. The active engagement from the community with the work creates a more dynamic, tolerant, and inclusive community. It provides a catalyst for educational opportunities to engage in conversation and awareness of different cultures. It serves as a public reminder of how this sculpture is a symbol of inclusion for those often invisible. Works to build partnerships and collaboration between community members, is semi-permanent, allowing the bus to travel to community events. And my last point is I'd like to think of this bus as a living sculpture. It is living because it is inclusive and allows the public to interact with its many mediums. A viewer may choose to interact in a passive way by reflecting on the photographs, painted mural, and indigenous patterns, or engage actively by watching digital works, listening to audio recordings, or to creatively express their thoughts on the community board. And now I will turn it over to Alice. I want to share your...
So the map does show the area. You'll remember when you adopted our master plan for the park in 2015, we added the greenhouse area to the park. And at this point, we've just been making improvements to that area. But we believe the home base area that we have designated here on the northwestern side of the entrance gate would be a good location. It would be very visible and close to the county home road. Any questions on the location? So tonight we bring to you two recommendations. First, to approve our District Park greenhouse area for the home base for the bus sculpture comprised in the Sally Jacobs AMEXCAN Inclusive Public Art Project. And then secondly, and we like to think in terms of when grant funding is approved, to authorize the staff to develop an agreement to support the project and also to include the parameters of use for the site.
Okay. Any questions? This is sort of like a museum, a living museum, so to speak. I know museum's not quite the right word, but it also will be able to be moved.
It is mobile, and that's one of the beauty, and Sally, you might want to come back, but I think one of the beauties of this project is it is mobile, and so everything that we talk about in Pitt County, or most things we talk about the limitations of transportation, whether we're talking about children and students getting to a festival or a project, or whether we talk about seniors. Transportation enters into this, and this will be mobile. It is designed to go to festivals, to schools, and even beyond the boundaries of Pitt County. But what we need for the project is a home base, a place for the bus to be safe and secure when it's not out making tours in eastern North Carolina, and also a place where it can be visible. And when you drive up and down County Home Road, if this is approved, you will not be able to miss seeing that bus. And then, as most of you are aware, we have so many partners already in the complex that this fits nicely with, as Sally has indicated. And we've already talked about possibilities, and as we talked about earlier tonight, there are possibilities that we don't even know at this point.
So basically what you're looking for is a home base for us to approve that.
Yes, ma'am.
So, any?
I was going to mention one thing I just wanted to make clear, too, that part of the grant and why Z. Smith Reynolds was so excited about this is that it goes beyond a work of art, so that the exterior alone kind of defines their category for a work of art. So it needs to have a permanent, semi-permanent place for people to enjoy and engage in that exterior. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then the inside provides the extra engaging and active component that really made this foundation get excited about it. So should we receive the grant funding, we're one of 20, they will choose 10, we will be really excited because of its potential. So.
Okay.
There's no matching or anything?
No matching or anything. Do we have? No. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion to move and second to give you a home base and go for the money.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next, we have appointments to board. Mr. Elliott?
Yes, you have an appointment to the Agriculture Advisory Board. Tim Etheridge, his term has expired, representing the Northeast District. They are recommending Mr. Carl Briley to represent the Northeast District.
Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded. Mr. Goldson. Thank you. And Scott?
Next, for your appointment to the Simpson Planning Board, this is an ETJ appointment to the extraterritorial jurisdiction. Mayor Zek is recommending the appointment of Mr. Dewey Dunn.
So moved.
Move approval.
Okay. We have a motion for approval.
And then your next one, to the appointment to the Vidant Medical Center Board of Trustees. This is the seat formerly held by former Commissioner Jimmy Garris, who has resigned due to the fact that he is now on the Vidant Health Board, which is more of the parent board above the Vidant Medical Center Board of Trustees. The practice of the Board of Commissioners has been for a seated county commissioner to sit on the board as a voting member holding that seat attribute.
Okay. And I sit on that board also as a liaison, and if it's okay, I would like to nominate Mike to serve on that board, representing the commissioners. And second, okay. Let's vote.
Who did we appoint?
Mike Fitzpatrick. Okay. That passes. Is that it?
Yes,
For
ma'am.
you? Okay, next we have closed session. Can I have a motion to go, and then you can, or do we do it the other way around?
I can say the basis, and then you can say your motion.
Okay.
It has been suggested that this board go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A5 to establish or instruct the public body staff or negotiating agents concerning the position to be taken by or on behalf of the public body in negotiating the price or other material terms of a contract or proposed contract for the acquisition of real property by purchase, option, exchange, or lease. Also, under that same statute, subsection A4, to discuss matters related to the location or expansion of industry or other business in the area served by the public body. Also, under that same statute, section A1, to prevent the disclosure of confidential information. And also under that same statute, under section A3, for attorney-client privilege. With that, you may.
Move to go to closed session.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Let's vote, please. Go into closed session.
I'll check my sure we're off the air.
Okay.
for tomorrow.
Welcome back after our closed session. We will have commissioners' comments starting at that end.
No comment.
No comment.
We got to approve the minutes. We have to approve minutes.
We're going to get to that.
No comment.
Okay. And we have the business of approval of closed session
Madam
minutes.
Chair, I'd like to move to approve March 11th closed session minutes.
Second.
Okay.
By hand.
All in favor of approval of the minutes? Okay, it passes. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. Second it. Stand to vote.